My name is Laura Ilea in English. I'm here in an Exchange Plus program with the Catholic University of Peru with the Department of Philosophy. And I have a double background. On the one hand, as a philosopher, I have a thesis on Heidegger, on the first period of Heidegger, working in Freiburg, in different places in Europe, and also in comparative literature. At the moment, I am working as a professor at the Department of Comparative Literature in Cluj-Napoca in Romania, but I'm also a researcher at Sense Lab Concordia University in Montreal. So not only for the 20th century, but also for the 21st century. Just because before I came here, I mean the very night before I came to Peru, before taking the plane to Peru, I was involved in street movements in Romania, and I was very surprised, very shocked, and very enthusiastic about what happens there, because I was very skeptical at the beginning. I don't know if you know many things about his background, but let me tell you a little bit. It's the old struggle ever since we had the revolution in 1989 to overcome the past, just simply put, briefly put. And it's a long battle ever since. And at the beginning I said, well, I'm not going to the streets anymore to manifest against the same thing I was manifesting 20 years ago on the streets of Bucharest. And so that was a kind of skeptical attitude. And right after, I noticed on the street a kind of enthusiasm. I realized that the generation has changed. Meanwhile, we have a new generation, and their vitality and their sense of really wanting to build this kind of space of appearance, this space of values, so fragile, but at the same time very strong. That convinced me. And at the beginning I was just marching on the streets without saying anything. Sometimes my friends were a little bit upset with me because I didn't want to shout out the same slogans I was shouting out 20 years ago in Bucharest. But more and more I realized, well, that's a new people, that's a new enthusiasm, and they are really wanting to build this space of appearance, this space of value about which Hannah Arendt is talking all the time. Well, that's on the one side. And then, just before I came, just in order to contextualize this, I was also calling a good friend in Montreal, and I was talking about this kind of new revolution in Romania, and he was telling me, well, you know, we have different things going on here. It was this kind of attack in a mosque in Montreal after Trump's election, and this kind of movements it caused. It was a kind of nationalism in the Quebec city. And people from Montreal were also debating about, well, trying really to build a different space of reflection, because he said, we are not as nationalist as the people around the world are seeing us. So we are trying now to build a different space of discussion, a different space of reflection. And now coming to Hannah Arendt, I think that's one of the main points in Hannah Arendt's theory. Well, this space of appearance is very fragile, for sure. And that's the thing that she's telling all the time, was it's irreversible, it's fragile, it's unpredictable, but it's the only answer to difficult political situations. Because otherwise, if you're just getting rid of it, if you're just neglecting this fragile space of appearance, you don't have other choices than to embrace ideologies. And I think that was the worst thing that happened in the 20th century. And it's also a threat right now, as we've seen a little bit in Europe, in the United States, in all over the world actually. So it's a threat, and I think this idea of, well, action as startling, unexpected beginning, as possibility really to create something new, actually, that's her idea, that politically speaking, we are not in this world in order to die, but in order to begin. So action, as I'm seeing now on the streets, the Romanian streets, that's the situation, that's the context I know very well. And also I've been part of the student movement in Montreal in 2012. And you're just seeing, that's something that's creating ad hoc on the place. And it's very, very amazing what happens, because you're not expecting it. At the very beginning, you can just say, well, if it's not fluid, if it's not conducted by an ideology, it will never work. and things are just rolling, and all of a sudden something changes. So I think that's one of the maybe the most important contribution of Hannah Arendt's theory. She doesn't want ideologies. She says, well, ideology is always connected either to totalitarianism, either to Nazi movement or whatever, what happened in the 20th century. And action is the only answer. Action as unpredictable beginning. So that's what we are witnessing right now. And I'm still very confident in this power of action, despite everything. Yes. So I believe that mostly it is related to what happened afterwards, and that the movements on the streets, again, the social movements, and not only, I mean, the social media movements and whatever happens in the United States afterwards, is trying to coagulate the same space of appearance I was just talking about 2 minutes ago. And well, I'm not very much involved in the politics of the United States, but as I told you just before, I think it has a lot of similarities with what happens in Europe and with what happens in Canada from this point of view, especially as a counter-reaction to a kind of power that is trying to impose itself. And as I said before, I think from this point of view, still Hannah Arendt is relevant also for the 21st century. So there are things that are coagulating right now, and she's very relevant, as her theory used to be for the 20th century.
Okay. We have another question?
Yes, but
No.
Okay. How do you see the current relationship between Europe and the United States based on your perspective as a European?
Well, half European. Because, yes, I used to live in Montreal, so in the North American space for 10 years, and I'm still related to it. And I think the most important lesson, or the most important issue at stake is multiculturalism. So that's the main problematic thing now in the United States, because you have the feeling that it's a kind of rejection of multiculturalism and an increased, I would say, a tendency to racism. And I think the big lesson, at least, well, on the one hand, Canada could give to this context is the struggle for multiculturalism. And as you know, in Europe, multiculturalism is in crisis too, but still, and that's my hope and that's my wish, in Europe, most of the countries are struggling for this idea of really being able to live together within a certain space. Well, why is it problematic in Europe? Because there is a kind of crisis of imaginary, as many people say. I mean, in building this vision of the European Union, this vision was based on two programs, or two visionary programs, and they are in crisis. I mean, there are people who say that, for instance, the idea of empire collapsed after the two failures. One was the failure of Hitler's empire, of course, and another one was a kind of failure of Napoleonic, so the empire built by Napoleon. And that's why this idea of empire doesn't function anymore. So the alternative to it, I would say, is really being able to rebuild something anew on this basis of multiculturalism. The idea is, well, there are many people who are very nostalgic and who would like to go back a little bit to very clear frontiers, to very clear spaces, but they want it or not, Europe has changed, Canada has changed, United States has changed, people are just migrating from one place to another, and we cannot, I mean, it's kind of puzzle, it's a kind of puzzle of different populations that have to cohabitate with each other, and it's not possible to go back anymore, to go back to this model of, well, very clear, defined spaces. And that's maybe a lesson that Europe could give to this situation in the United States now, and especially in Canada. Because of course, there are many weaknesses to this system, but still as a wish, as a model, as a value, this idea of multiculturalism is very important.